Hello and welcome to another video. In this video I want to show you how you can control your jobs running in a GitLab CI pipeline. To control our jobs we'll be using rules and the needs keyword. If you'd like to learn more, stay tuned. Here I have switched over to my gitlab.com account in which I've created a repository. I called the repository in this case simply templates, and I have created a directory in here, my Gitlab Ci Yml file, and I will talk about this in a second. If you have not created a gitlab.com account, I do suggest maybe you want to do that. If you want to learn more about GitLab and GitLab CI, you can head on over to gitlab.com and you create an absolutely free account. They will not ask you for a credit card or anything. And then you can use 5 gigabytes of storage, you get 10 gigabytes of transfer per month, and you get 400 free CI/CD minutes per month. That is actually really good to learn about GitLab and pipelines and how to handle these things. Getting back to the repository that I have set up for this demonstration. As I've said, I have a folder in here, or a directory, in which I've created a couple of templates that I will use as examples to run specific jobs. I have a build job, deploy jobs into different environments here, and then I have an integration test, a push artifact if you want to push your build artifacts to, for example, Artifactory, or also GitLab actually offers packages and registries here as well, so you can actually push artifacts in here as well. You get that for free. And then a couple more scans here. I have a SAS scan and a unit test. All they're doing, regardless which one I pick, we can take a look at it real quick. I'm just echoing something out. Again, this is just for demonstration purposes. Getting back to my repository, if I take a look at my Gitlab Ci Yml file, this file is needed to run my pipeline. I do have 4 different stages defined here. I have a quality stage, I have a build stage, a push stage, and a deploy stage, and then I'm including all my template files here in my Gitlab Ci Yml. Now, with my jobs being defined in a way that they're literally just doing what they're supposed to do, and me importing or including all these files here in my Gitlab Ci Yml and having my stages defined, let's see when we run a pipeline what will happen. So I will go here into pipelines, and then on the furthest side over here there's a run pipeline button, and I will click the run pipeline button, and I have everything on my main branch currently. I do not pass any variables in, and let's just click run pipeline. I'll scroll up a little bit and you'll see all my jobs are here. Here's my quality stage, my build stage, my push stage, and my deploy stage, and here are my jobs that are running. And right now, the way that GitLab works is when I have stages defined, it will not move on to the next stage until the previous stage is complete. So in this case here, by default that is, in this case here, all my jobs in my quality stage have completed. My build job starts now, then it completed, my push, and then I'm going to my deploy, and you will see that my deploy jobs will execute. If you pay attention, you will see that all my deploy jobs are going at the same time. You may have also noticed in my quality job stage here that all my jobs ran at the same time. That may not be desirable. So let's apply some changes so that we can actually control that these jobs only run if certain criteria is fulfilled. So the first criteria that I want to do is I do not want to run, for example, my integration test until my SAS scan is done, and I do not want to run my unit test until my SAS scan is done. So let's see how we can control that. For the purposes of this demonstration, I will use GitLab's built-in IDE. It is actually the simplest way to change some files on the fly. I will not clone the repository to my local computer. So if I'm going into repository, files, and then I have a button here, Web IDE, and if we click on that, you will see here are my files listed. There's my directory, here are my files, and then I have a editor on this side here in which I can edit. So as I've said, let's say I want my SES scan not to run until my integration test has completed. To achieve that, I will simply go into my sesscan.yaml file. I have my stage here, I have my script here, and what I can simply do now is I'm adding the needs keyword, colon, and then we'll pass an array in, and in quotes I would need to tell it here that I want to finish my integration test. This is the job name that needs to be passed in here. So my integration test should complete first, because the SES scan here needs this integration test before it can run. And then I said that I wanted to not run my unit test until my SES scan is completed. So I'm doing the same here. I'm going into my unit test. I'm adding in here my needs keyword, colon, and then I pass in here my SES scan. Again, this is the job name. If we're verifying it here, there is my job name, and I put my job name in here. So now we can commit our changes. To do that, we just click the commit button here in the Web IDE. I want to commit this to my main branch, and I hit commit. This commit should have triggered a new pipeline. And let's take a look. There is my pipeline that's running. If I go in here now, that the integration test has completed, and only now is my SES scan running. And now my SES scan has completed, and only now my unit test is running. So now I have gained control over the order in which these jobs are actually executing by simply adding the needs and saying job A does need job B to complete first before it can run. So this worked out perfect. Now my deployments are still doing the same thing, which I want to change so that I'm actually deploying in the order of first I'm going to the development environment, then I want to deploy to my QA environment, and then to my UAT environment. So let's get these changes in. So I'm doing the same again. I'm going to repository. I am going into my Web IDE. I'm going into my template files in my case here, and dev should run. QA should not run until my dev deploy is completed. So I'm taking the job name here. I can copy it, for example. Then I go into my deploy job, and then here deploy QA. And then here I'm again adding my needs, and then again it's an array. You can also have multiple files in here, and then I'm adding my deploy dev, and then my UAT deployment should not run until my QA deployment is done. I'm doing the same here, needs, and we're passing in here our deploy QA job name. And lastly, for production should not deploy unless UAT deployed. So I'm doing the same here, and then here we're just making this UAT. Okay, we have all our changes applied. We can hit commit. We want to commit it to the main branch in my case. I hit commit here, and this again should have triggered another pipeline. Let's take a look at our pipeline. There it is running, and if I'm opening this, now we gotta wait a minute. We know already that our integration test, SES scan, and unit test will run fine. I will pause here, and when I'm going to the deployments, I will be back. My push artifact job has just executed. It just started running, so here I am back. So we can see how our deployments are now going in order. My dev deployment will go first. Next should be my QA deployment. So let's wait for the dev deploy to complete. There's my QA deployment. Then we said after QA is deployed, we want to go to UAT. Let's take a look at that. and lastly it should go to prod. So once my UAT has completed, there is my prod. So this is how you can, with the needs keyword, you can control when your jobs are running and make them dependent on each other. So if I'm now going in here in job dependencies, you see here too. So up here is a toggle, stage, and job dependencies that shows you the dependencies of the different jobs and what order they will be executed. So you can see this here as well. You can show dependencies, and then you have the lines in here, and then you can see that these three jobs are dependent on each other. There is no dependency in this job. And you can see that then there too. We'll stick with the stages. It's a little bit easier to see everything. So this is how you can control your jobs. Now, if we want to control when our job's running based on other criteria, there is also rules that can be applied here. I will give a brief introduction into the rules in CI YAML or in YAML files here for GitLab CI. I do understand and know there was also in the past the only and the except keyword. They were used to gain control over your jobs in your pipeline. However, only and except are not actively developed anymore by GitLab, meaning rules is going forward the way that you would apply rules. And you will see too that this is actually very beneficial to use rules in your pipelines. So let's dive into it. For this example of rules, what we will go ahead and do is we will simply introduce a variable in our GitLab Ci YAML file, in which, or with this variable, we will be able to use to toggle on and off our deployments. So with the simple set of one variable, I want to be able to say run my deployments or don't run my deployments. I've prepared this already. You probably don't want to see me type in, seeing that I'm not the fastest typer, but let's take a look at it. So here in my GitLab Ci YAML file, I have created with the variables keyword, I have created a variable called deploy app, and I've set that to false. And then in my template files here, in my dev deployment, QA deployment, UAT deployment, and prod deployment, I have added a rule. So the syntax for rule is the keyword rules, colon, and then you add a list, in this case a dash, and if, colon, you give it the, to evaluate what you want to evaluate, and then you can give it a when, and I'll explain this. So the if, obvious, if this is true, or if this evaluates to true, then run this job, and when to run it, in this case, is always. Another when here could be on success, and on success would mean that all previous jobs from all previous stages need to have completed successfully before this job would run, if this evaluates to true. This is what I did for dev and what I did for QA. And to give you an example, another example of this when keyword, I have my UAT and my prod deployments, I have actually set to run manually. And the way you do that is in the rules here. I have said if my deploy app is true, then run this job, but it needs to be executed manually. Don't run automatically. And this is how you can use rules. Again, we use rules here with a variable that we have created. You can also use variables that exist in every pipeline. I will show you after we've taken a look at this pipeline running. I will show you how you can use them too. So without further ado, let's go over to our CI/CD. Let's click on a run pipeline. I want to run on my main branch. I have no other variables I want to put in. And here goes my job. As you may remember, I have set my deploy app to false, and you see there is no deployment jobs here. So right now my pipeline is running and it's happy, and there is no deployments running because I set it to false. I will cancel this pipeline. We don't need to wait for the entire thing to run. We know that it runs. Let's go ahead and change my variable to true. So I'm going through the web IDE, and I just simply set this to true, and I hit commit, and I want to commit it to my main branch. I hit commit, and if I'm now going back to my pipeline here, I will see my pipeline is running, and you will see here are my deployments. I will pause the video right now, and once I'm in my deployments, I will be back and we'll see if my manual deployments really will trigger as manual deployments. And again, my push artifact has just triggered, so let's see the order in which these are running still should be preserved. I want to note at this point too that if you create rules and you use needs in the same job, you need to make sure that you don't break the needs. So for example, if I had created a rule that my QA deployment should only run under a certain condition, and I have a needs in my UAT to my QA deployment, and the QA deployment doesn't trigger, my UAT deployment will fail. It will actually give you an error, and we can demonstrate that in a second. It will give you an error because that needs has been broken. And I will demonstrate that after we are completed here. But you see now my QA deployment has completed, and here's my UAT deploy. You have a little gear icon here, and there is a play button. So this will not execute until I click it manually. Somebody needs to go into the pipeline and manually click this to execute it. And you see here my deploy prod job has not started yet because it's dependent on my UAT job. So if I click the play button here, it will do my UAT deploy, and once this completes, I should get the same here. I get a little gear icon and my play button to do my prod deploy. So once this completes, and there you go, there's my gear icon, there is my play button, I hit play, and my pipeline finishes successfully. Let's go ahead and actually introduce intentionally a quick error to demonstrate how the needs would be broken if you introduce rules. I'll do that intentionally very early here. I just say create a rule on my SAS scan to demonstrate this. So I'm going into Files, Templates, SAS scan, and I'm just creating a rule in here. And I will say rules if colon, and I'm just making up a variable. I'm making up a variable SAS scan $SAS scan equals true, and we know this is not the case because this variable doesn't exist. And when always. So this will not trigger the job because this variable doesn't exist, so it will not evaluate to true, so this job will not run. And you will see now, because my next job, which is my unit test, is dependent with the needs, dependent on the SAS scan, it will now give me an error when I try to run my pipeline. So let's do a commit. Let's go to our pipeline here, and you see it failed. And if I go in here, it says unit test job needs SAS scan job, but SAS scan job is not in any previous stage. This is because it hasn't been triggered, and I have my dependency here with the needs, and this is how my pipeline is now broken. So I just wanted to point this out to pay attention to this when you use needs and rules in your pipelines. Seeing that I committed this to a different branch, I don't need to clean up. I can just delete the branch if I wanted to, and we can move on to the next example. Writing rules and having manually created variables is one thing, and I've mentioned before there are actually a lot of variables available in a running pipeline. And if you want to see which ones there are, you can just simply Google up Gitlab predefined variables. And as you see here, you would end up on this page, predefined variable reference for all tiers, meaning this is for on-prem as well as GitLab SaaS, and regardless of your subscription level. But these are variables that are available by default in a GitLab pipeline. They don't need to be created. So you could, for example, write a rule if so this would be the author of the commit, and it would be the name, email format, and you can write rule, well, if somebody makes a commit and it's this person, do something. Or you could go ahead and say, if I have a commit that comes from a particular branch, I want to maybe trigger other jobs or something along these lines. So there's a lot of different variables available at your disposal here, from which you can also write rules. You can also write multiple rules, so you can have multiple if statements. This is actually a really great way that you can gain full control over your pipelines. I will post this link here in the video description if you're interested to take a look. These are all CI, meaning pipeline variables, and then there is a section further down. There's also special variables that are available in merge requests, because there is a different set of variables. For example, you can get the target branch, you can get the source branch here. This is the merge request source branch. Then you get the merge request target branch. So if on a merge request you want to execute various rules or do something with these variables, then you can use these there as well. When writing rules, it is also important that you pay attention to the order in which they are evaluated. To demonstrate this, I have created another variable here, and I call it no prod. And the goal of this variable is to control my prod deployments. So I've created here a variable no prod. I set this to true. If I now take a look at my prod job or my prod deployment, where is it? There it is. And we take a look at it. So I have my rules here, and I have added to it that if no prod is true, to never deploy. And I've also added here an example of actually using a predefined variable. I'm using here the CI commit ref protected. That means only deploy to production if I am on a protected branch in my GitLab CI repository where the pipeline is running. So if this commit is coming or running on in reference to a protected branch, only then deploy to prod. So the expectation would be, if I set no prod to true and I am on a protected branch, I want to run it always on a protected branch, and these two rules will apply from the top down. So what that means is my rules, the job has been executed, my rules have been looked at, it's taking a look at this, and it says this is true, don't run it, and it will never reach this. Meaning, as long as this is set to true, it will never run this job, regardless of anything else. So if I was to move these around, meaning put this on top, then it would always run it, and it will never actually look at this rule. So you're going to be careful how you order your rules in order to execute your jobs appropriately. So with these rules that I've put in place right now, let's see that this actually does not trigger my prod deploy. I have, as you've seen before, set this to true. So we can take a look at it real quick. If I go just into my pipelines, and again, I will not run the whole thing through. I will just run it real quick to see if my prod deployment job actually does come up here. And you can see here, it is not coming up. That is great. Now let's go ahead and create a branch. We will go ahead and create branch. Actually, I don't need to create a new branch. I have a branch right here, and I can use, I create a new branch. I don't want to use that branch. That was the broken one. I call this branch simply dev. Create my branch from main. Here is my branch. If I now take a look at my pipelines, I should see two pipelines running. One is running on my dev branch right here, and the other one is on my main branch. I will cancel both of them for now, because we don't need them both. Now, when my main branch should be by default a protected branch. So we can take a look at this, repository, branches, and you see here, main, default, protected. So with the rule that I've added to my prod job, only if I'm running on my main branch, because it is protected, it should allow me to deploy to production. When I'm running on my dev branch, it should not allow me to deploy to production. Let's make one small change, as I want to remove the variable rule that I added to my prod deploy job, because I do not want that to interfere. And I will simply remove this rule right there. Let's move this here. Fantastic. Now we go ahead and we commit. So now my rule just says, if my deploy app variable is set to true, and if I am on a protected branch, only then allow me to deploy to prod. So let's take a look at this, if this works the way that I want to. Going back to my pipelines. I can cancel this job. I don't need this job. And what we'll do now is I will just go ahead and I will run the first one on my main branch, which is a protected branch. So I do expect to see my prod deploy here, and there it is. And if I am now going ahead and I run a second pipeline and I run that on my dev branch, I would expect not to see the prod deploy, and you see it is not here. This was just a very brief introduction into rules and how you can apply them, a little bit about needs keywords. Keep in mind when you use needs and rules, keep in mind the dependencies, that you don't break them. This will give you errors. Keep in mind that when you use rules, the order of evaluation is important, and take a look at the predefined variables. They are extremely useful. There's a lot of things you can derive out of it. You can also actually go ahead and in your rules use regex. So for example, you could trigger certain jobs only if certain references to certain repositories have been made, as you can, for example, evaluate the path in a regex and so forth. The possibilities are pretty much endless. Not endless, but there's a lot of possibilities how you can apply rules and how you can gain full control over your pipelines and the jobs in your pipelines. Well, I hope you found this helpful. If you did, I would appreciate a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.